Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's Sohbet and Sufi meditation on this, was it the 7th of August 2023. Uh, Hi, Tony. Good to see you. Hope we get a chance to meet at some point in person. It's been ages. Um, so today, um, I was going to discuss a little bit about a couple of things. So, continuing on from last week, I was discussing about a lot of people these days seem to have fallen for conspiracy theories and ideas that are, I was going to say half hatched. They're not even half hatched ideas, they are literally a nonsense. And you can find this on YouTube, you can find it on TikTok, you can find on a number of channels. And simultaneously, we do have a problem with the mainstream media not always reporting a fair narrative of whatever is going on, whether it is something which is scientific, whether it is something which is political, whether it is something to do with religion or with various communities. So this is what initially causes the distrust of people to go on other channels like YouTube channels, like what's that other one called? Can't think of it right now. It's like YouTube anyway, but it's got videos. Channels like that, and also various other platforms, TikTok as well, and not everything on these platforms is wrong. Even with conspiracy theories, not everything which is in conspiracy theories is nonsense. I mean, if it was, nobody would listen to it at all. But at the same time, it's like, and it usually starts from people asking questions, which is not a bad thing. What the real problem is, though, is when people start listening to these things and they turn off their critical reasoning, because then you start to believe anything. As long as you are engaging your critical reasoning, it's good to question things, whether that be in the official narrative or in alternative media, alternative narratives, uh, or even these conspiracy channels. You know, sometimes it's good to look at these things to get a different perspective, but as long as you're engaging your critical reasoning. And if you don't, you end up with a whole mishmash of things which doesn't make sense. For instance, on the other hand, if someone is learning from credible sources, they're learning from science, they're learning from history, they're learning from credible teachers and credible sources, they are going to be well informed. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have an answer to everything, because of course not. No one does. Only the Almighty has an answer for everything. But at least they'll be well informed. And their narrative, their own personal narrative, is going to be something that's fairly coherent. Whereas if you just start looking at everything on these alternative and conspiracy channels without engaging critical reasoning, well, you end up listening to ideas on a flat earth, a hollow earth, that people never went to the moon. Conversely, that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin saw flying saucers on the moon. That last point might have some validity to it. They might have seen something, but the thing is, it can't all be true. That's the point I'm getting at here. Yet some people end up really confused because they've got no anchor. And the anchor is the scientific method, which actually comes out of Islam. Muslims developed this, and the West got this from Muslims, as indeed His Majesty King Charles III pointed out at a speech in Oxford many years ago. The West learned this from Muslims. It's not to say that there weren't people in the West even before that who had this, but certainly by the time it came out of Muslim Spain, most of the West had fallen into centuries of darkness. And that doesn't say that everybody in the West was ignorant. It doesn't mean everybody in the world was ignorant. Of course not. Muslim civilization was going through a great time of science and development, technological development. And people in countries like parts of the world like India and China were using technologies, and they were fairly developed. When I say technologies, I don't mean like what I'm using now, but they had other kinds of like mechanical technologies and the things, architectural technologies, which had been forgotten in Europe. Sanitation, even street lighting. It wasn't electric, but some places in the world had street lighting before we did in Europe. So the thing is, it's important that we learn from credible sources, and that we don't just listen to everything as having equal value. It's okay on the one hand even to listen, but as long as you're not giving everything equal value, when something is backed up by evidence and something is not. I mean, even we taught this within our tradition when you're studying hadiths, for instance. Some have more credibility than others. You look for the evidence, and when you're looking for something as like an Islamic practice, you look for evidence in the Quran, in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, in the Hadith, in the Sirah. You look for evidence for it. You don't just base it on nothing. And this is actually where in the West we get the scientific method from. But then us Muslims don't seem to be the people that are using it. I'm not saying all Muslims. Of course, there are Muslim scientists to this day. But a friend of mine pointed out, who I was chatting to earlier, mentioned to me, at the University of Birmingham, you have the oldest Quran pages in the world. And I said, yes, as far as I know, they are the oldest carbon dated Quran pages anywhere in the world. It's not to say that they necessarily are the actual oldest Quran pages, but these are the ones that have been checked and scientifically tested through radiocarbon dating to prove that they are from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, which means that they are genuine, original Quran pages. And we go into a conversation about how, well, it's strange that this is at the University of Birmingham in a European country. Yet, how many old and original Quran pages and Qurans must there be around the world? Haven't any of these been carbon dated? How come no one in any of these majority Muslim countries has either carbon dated these Qurans or sent off a sample? I think the sample probably only needs to be like half a centimeter, little tiny piece or something. Put in a little container, shipped. Even if they don't have the technology there, they could make an arrangement with one of our universities in the West and get it tested. Interesting. It's just reminding me of something else. How come there's a lot of things which the Prophet Muhammad SAW said about dates and advised people to eat dates, that dates are a really good thing to eat. It's not the only thing that the Prophet Muhammad SAW mentioned, not the only food, but dates are something that has a lot of benefits. A few years ago, I was reading a study from an Israeli university. this Israeli university had actually done research on dates and the benefits of eating dates. It actually backed up what the Prophet Muhammad taught about dates. But how come it's the Israelis that did this research and not one of our majority Muslim countries? Why the Israelis? Not about the Israelis. There's something else that I was reading about. Halal. We have the halal dabia system, the way we slaughter the animal, that causes least suffering for the animal. There's some Muslims have done research on this, but I remember reading a paper that had gone into quite some depth about this. And again, it was from an Israeli university because the kosher system is very close to the halal system. So how come we have Western universities and Israeli universities that are doing this research, which is actually useful for us as Muslims, and not more Muslims doing this research? And even when Muslims are doing this research, like at the Cabri Library, one of the people who is doing the research is Professor Neelam. She is a Muslim, but within a university in Birmingham, in a European country. Why aren't we seeing this more within majority Muslim countries? And this indicates that we have issues within these countries that need to be addressed in terms of education, in terms of development. The modern scientific revolution, I don't want to say the scientific, there's been many scientific revolutions throughout human history, some of which were in the distant past and have been forgotten because those societies even either disappeared or declined afterwards. So there have been many scientific revolutions, but the modern scientific revolution, it started from Muslims. Yeah, literally all it traces back to predominantly Muslim societies. And it came into Europe from these Muslim societies. And then we had the Renaissance in Europe, the reorganization of European societies that allowed us to explore the sciences. I mean, a theory that is known about from the West is the theory of evolution. Today, we have a lot of Muslims that believe in creationism. Now, what do I mean by this? Now, all believers believe that this is God's creation. I mean, you're not really a believer if you don't believe that this is God's creation. I believe I'm created by God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I believe every living creature in existence is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I believe the earth itself, the sun, the whole universe is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the question is not that. The question is how. And Muslims in the past, Muslim scholars and scientists, they investigated these things. And when it comes to the evolution of life, the creation of life, you had scholars like Al-Jahiz that investigated this and wrote a book on it. Even in the Muqaddimah, it's referenced about evolution. Even you'll see references in the writings of Maulana Rumi. When Charles Darwin published his book on the origin of species back in the late 19th century, one of the criticisms that was thrown at him, one of the attacks by his detractors, was that he was promoting the Muslim creation story. They use the word Mohammedan, the Mohammedan creation story. Because among Muslim societies, it was well accepted that life evolved. Yet nowadays, if you go into a number of these societies, the ideas of what's known as creationism have taken hold. Now, what's the difference between these? Well, evolution can be understood in either an atheistic or a theistic way. Evolution is really neither. It's an explanation of the processes that cause speciation. That means one species becoming different species. We can see an example of this, not quite to the degree of speciation, but within such things as pigeons, chickens, dogs. Use those as examples because they're more apparent. It's true in cats and virtually every domesticated creature that we have. Even in our livestock, such as cows. Cows are much more docile and smaller creatures than the aurochs that they're descended from. The aurochs, this big, fearsome, wild cattle that used to live and roam across Europe, including in Britain. You think of a water buffalo, it's something like that. It's not a water buffalo, but something as fearsome and powerful as a water buffalo. Domestic cows are tame and docile by comparison. But domestic cows are the direct descendants of aurochs. Domesticated dogs are the direct descendants of wolves. Wolves, which are much bigger, much more fearsome. And I'm not guessing at this. This is totally fact. Even a modern dog can mate with a wolf, and they will produce offspring that are midway between whatever breed of dog it is and the wolf. Of course, some dogs are too small that it's not likely to happen. But even then, it's possible outside of the animal to artificially inseminate, and it would produce an offspring. And dogs are a good example because if you look at dogs, some dogs are little tiny things. They won't get any bigger than this. And some dogs are as big as wolves. Some dogs have little tiny legs, some dogs have big legs. There's a lot of diversity. And you can roughly see that they're all dogs, but some of these dogs look more different from a wolf than a fox does from a wolf. And a fox is a different species to a wolf. So evolution describes this process of speciation. Now, these particular breeds of dogs are varieties of dogs. They're breeds. If you mix them all together and interbred them, eventually they would probably, their offspring would start to look more like wolves again. But all their genes that they have within them, they diverge off from a wolf. And they're the descendants from a wolf. They come out of the genetic pool of wolves. And the same is true if you look at chickens or if you look at pigeons. Domesticated versions of each can look quite different from their wild ancestors, and even from different types of chickens and different types of pigeons. A similar process to breeding happens in nature. And if it continues for long enough, not just a few decades or a few hundred years, but thousands, tens of thousands and more, it can lead to new species. They can no longer interbreed with each other. But as I'm sure you would all agree, you can see the similarities between a horse, a zebra, a donkey. You can see the similarities between lions and tigers, even and domestic cats. And you can see the similarities between cats and dogs, which are related, but they're not as closely related as cats and tigers. But this was discussed by Al-Jahiz in his own book 1,000 years before Darwin put pen to paper. Islam had a golden age because Muslims used to study and investigate, and they went where the evidence led. Now we have this culture within Western universities and also modern universities all around the world. But that culture, that concept, that approach, it's come from Muslim societies. Yet today, how many Muslim societies do you see this spirit of investigation, this spirit of learning? Even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran, surely within this are signs for people of understanding. So many times in different places within the Holy Quran, Allah is inviting us in the words of the Holy Quran to gain understanding. How do we gain understanding? By looking into these signs that Allah tells us about in the Quran or the signs in the natural world. They're all ayat Allah, signs of Allah, whether they are in the Quran or whether they're in the creation, which is Allah's creation. How many of us are studying these things? How many of us are going on what is evidence-based? And then how many people are just looking at TikTok or YouTube, listening to anybody talking about anything, and just because they might be a bit charismatic, then they're saying, oh, maybe that's true, maybe it's like that, without even engaging their brain. It is quite worrying when we have this within our societies today. I mean, if you go back, I was going to say hundreds of years ago. Actually, if you go back to the 1950s when my dad was a child and used one of these devices and play a video or play some music or film yourself. I mean, cameras at that time used to be huge boxes, video cameras. But you film yourself and play it back on this screen. You would be thought of as a magician. People would think it's magic, or you think you're an extraterrestrial from another world. Yet that's only back in the 1950s. If you go back further than that, go back 100 years ago or 200 years ago, they really think you're a musician. And if you're in Europe, you'd probably be tied to a stake and burned at it because they think you're a witch. And that's what they used to do to witches back then. Yeah, this is not magic. It's technology. Technology that was developed through science, through studying and understanding the natural world, through studying and understanding what comes into making one of these. One thing is radio waves. You can't have mobile signal or Wi-Fi without radio waves. You have to understand radio waves. You have to understand electricity. You have to understand batteries and develop quite good battery technology because these things eat a lot of power. Then there's the screen. Different types of screens. You've got LCD screens. You've got LED screens like OLED, AMOLED. The different technologies. It might look similar when you're using it, but it's actually a different underlying technology that produces that picture. Just like if you go back before LCD screens were developed, you used to have cathode ray tubes, which are the old kind of glass TVs and monitors that are huge things. Now we can display a very good quality image on a very thin screen. And this is thinner than this because most of that is case. But and the screen's even thinner than the actual phone itself. So, I mean, this is all technology, but how many technologies go into creating one of these? And technologies come from science. If we do not understand the science, we do not understand the technologies, you cannot make one of these. I haven't even got around to discussing the CPU and all of the other sensors and things which make this device possible. And yet people use these devices. They go on TikTok and flick, 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 flick. As Sheikh Nur Nurjan Mohammadi says, they swap the tasbih for the TikTok and flick on the TikTok. Hours on end. And then say, I got no time. Where did your time go? And what were you watching? What have you learned? Have you benefited from that? Now, it's fine to have some so-called downtime. You know, we all need some downtime. We all need to relax sometimes. And when I was younger, and even today, I like to put on a good film or, you know, drama or something that is a quality program. Even that I might learn something from if it's the right kind of thing. I mean, there's a comedy series called Yes Minister from the 1970s, which actually you could learn a lot from, even though it's a comedy. Quality programs that have some education and thought in them. But then there's a lot of stuff nowadays which is just nonsense. How many hours are you going to give to that? And then we wonder where our time has gone. And what have we achieved or what haven't we achieved? Well, that's where your time went. If you look at any of the people who achieved great things, they invested a lot of time in whatever they were doing. Even the people who invented these. You look at Steve Jobs, he was dedicated to his work. As a proper workaholic, and the people under him were. Bill Gates is as well. Even now, even though he's left Microsoft, you know, and thrown himself into philanthropy and whatever else he does, he's a workaholic. Whether you like him or not, you know, that's besides the point. This is a fact about the man. Elon Musk is as well. They love their work and they work very hard. They don't just sit back and click on TikTok. Otherwise, this would never been invented. And I don't think there's anybody or many people alive that understand every technology and every science that goes into creating one of these, because they're all different things. You know, it's like all of the components which go into making one of these has to be designed, and it's initially on a separate chip, and then it just becomes mass produced and it becomes a component that's available and you can plug it into everything else. But I mean, if you look at any one of these devices, if I go on this now and go on my device, I mean, this has 14 sensors available on it. An accelerometer, checks the magnetic field, orientation, that we know how the device is pointed, light, proximity, it can sense whether you are close to it or not. Gravity, it can tell, it weighs the gravity. So if you took it up a mountain, it would know there's less gravity, or if you took it in an aircraft. Linear acceleration, it can tell how fast you're going. Rotational vector, all of these are different sensors. There's 14 of them on this, and there's 14 on this, but probably more on that phone. It's a more expensive phone, and if you get another more up-to-date phone or from a more expensive brand, it's going to have even more sensors on it. So processor, there's different kinds of sensors, the screen, the basic radio antenna and chip that's on there, which allows it to connect through radio frequencies to the mobile towers or to Wi-Fi. All of that has to come together in this device, and it's really a computer with all of these sensors and with a phone built in. But how many of us have any understanding about this? I mean, it's not magic, it's technology. But that technology was developed through hard work, studying, critical reasoning. And yet nowadays, people just use it for TikTok or to watch videos about a hollow earth or a flat earth or about a dome over the earth. There is no substitute for proper education. And you think of the irony of what I was just saying, people watching videos about nonsense that they think is more credible than the science that developed this, which they know works. And it works because it's based on science fact, not science imagination or conspiracy theories. There is such a thing as the truth and as reality. And because of how science works, all of those things, such as like the theories that talk about radio waves and chips and all the rest of it, they're all called theories, but they're scientific theories. They're not theories the way you and I would speak on the street, just generally, where it means an idea. A scientific theory means a provable hypothesis that fits the evidence that's being gathered and is the best explanation at that time, i.e., it's basically a fact as far as can be ascertained. I mean, I mention this because it does concern me. There are too many people I've spoken to who seem to be very scientifically illiterate and then talk about flat earth theories, a dome over the earth, that evolution is completely nonsense, and stuff like this, which has no basis in reality. And that's just on the scientific side of things. A lot of people have no idea about their history, whether that's English history or French history or Pakistani history or American history, wherever you go in the world. A lot of people don't know their history, don't have much understanding of science, don't have much understanding about any of these subjects. And then they wonder why they might have been deceived on this or that matter by something in the mainstream media. Well, do you think you're subject to any less deception if you watch alternative media, if you've never really studied any of these things? And it's never too late. You can always read up on these things, take a college course or university course and develop your understanding. But to just completely remain ignorant. And to think knowledgeable, but then it's like not really studying and just watching anything else and thinking that something that is actually anybody who is educated would think is crazy. And to think that that might be real. And then to mention a whole load of these different ideas which are presented in some of these videos on social media and alternative channels, which are then all conflictory with it. And they, people they do this and they're like, oh, have you heard about this? And oh, we didn't go to the moon. No, I don't believe anybody went to the moon. They've never actually studied the Apollo program. No, no, no. I think it can't be possible because if a rocket went up, it would crash into the glass dome. I mean, what glass dome? I mean, this is a really medieval idea which has been long since disproven. And you can even disprove it yourself just with a telescope and just by traveling around the earth. If you've been up in an aircraft and traveled from one country to another country, you know it can't be like that. Or you should do. But there are people who believe this and are absolutely convinced by it. And it seems to be increasing. And these are people, they complain about being deceived by the mainstream media and deceived by the school system, but then they're just accepting something that is totally irrational instead. My friend was mentioning to me earlier that if they went back 100 years ago with one of these, the people might think that they had magic or were using witchcraft or something. But if this kind of non-scientific ideologies keep spreading, how long will it be before people think this is magic again? And there will only be a few people within society who have any understanding of technology. It is quite worrying because even Carl Sagan pointed out this very point that we live in a society, and bearing in mind, I mean, Carl Sagan's been passed away for some time, but even he said this when he was still alive. So this is going back a few decades. That we are living in a very scientific world, using technologies all the time where we're depending upon that depend upon science. They're underpinned by science. And yet the average person's understanding of science and technology is decreasing. It's worrying because how can you use stuff and just use it? How can you have control over it if you don't understand it? And if a critical mass of people in society are like that, then that means that society doesn't control it. And we become very disempowered within such a society. We, all of us as people. Unless we have some understanding of the sciences and technologies. And, I'm speaking to myself as much as I'm speaking to anybody else here. I don't have a ideal understanding of these things myself. But at least I have some understanding. At least I read scientific articles and journals and have some grasp of some of these concepts. But and I've studied some of these things as well. But a lot of people haven't done that and don't do that. And it is just is very concerning, because where is that going to lead us as societies? I mean, if people already at this point are feeling deceived and misguided, what about if the decline in the understanding of these technologies continues to decline? People understand even less than what they do now about these and future technologies in the next decade or two. It's going to make a very big gap between those people in society who understand technology and those who don't. How long will it be before we do get back to a world where people think this is magic or witchcraft? I mean, it probably won't be like before, because, unless people stop using it all. But still, it leaves people very vulnerable, especially with the developments of AI and virtual reality, and just more and more increasingly highly advanced technologies. The gap between those who understand and those who don't it's getting wider all the time, literally on a daily and weekly basis. And this is why it's important to read. Don't just watch TikTok, don't just watch videos, but read. And subscribe to scientific journals, and geographical journals like National Geographic, which actually have real good content in them. I mean, it's so helpful when we have an understanding, and this will even help us within our religion, because the Prophet Muhammad SAW did say in his last sermon to take his words to future generations, for there might be people in future generations who will understand them better than what we understand now. Anyway, I'm going to leave this there and do a little bit of zikr. I'll only do a short zikr, I think, because it is getting quite late, and that Sohbet was longer than I initially intended. But it is quite a worrying phenomenon, and I hope you take something from this, and try to learn, try to understand, and try to study, and don't think, whether you have an education or not, or whether you have degrees or not, don't think that this is impossible. I mean, or don't put yourself down. Anybody can learn. My father, he actually left school without a qualifications, because, I mean, we're going back to the early 1950s. He was quite poor, and from a very poor household. But my father went and studied a City and Guilds, which was worth 2 A levels. So he left school at 15 with no qualifications. By the time he was, I think, about 17, he had a City and Guilds which was worth 2 A levels. He made up for it, and then from that point on, he got other certificates and worked within as a assistant manager in what the company called George Mason's at the time, and his life went forward and he progressed, and he went back to into further education again even later on in life. He did not let that hold him back. And I know other people in my own life, some of whom I've helped, who didn't have a very good education or didn't have an education, and I encouraged them to learn, and they did, and they're much more well informed than when I first got to know them. And some of them were older than me. Don't let that be a barrier. And everyone who learns and informs themselves or goes on courses and it develops their understanding will feel empowered through doing so. It'd be really beneficial. I can't really explain how that will feel, because if you've never felt it you wouldn't know, but it is really empowering, and it gives you, what I can say is it will give you clarity on a lot of things, because you have the tools to be able to discern what is right and what's not right, what's true and what's false, and what's more true from what's more false. And you only get that through having an education. This is why our Prophet Muhammad SAW put so much emphasis on it. He, even like people who were prisoners of war, if they educated something like 10 people, they could go free, even just teaching them how to read or write. But I'm sure if they had some other useful knowledge and taught that, the Prophet Muhammad SAW would have also granted them the same reprieve. Education is really vital, and it's the foundation for any civilization. And this is something which is hardly encouraged within Islam. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. And if there's anything which I've said which you found beneficial, I give thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, my parents, and my sheikhs. And if there is any mistakes, then please forgive me. The mistakes are all my own. I'll read a short zikr because the time's getting on. نويت العابدين، نويت الرسل، نويت القوى، نويت الاعتكاف، نويت السوق، نويت الرياضة لله تعالى في يد الجميع. We begin with the recitation of the Kalama Shahada. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. We seek Allah's forgiveness through the recitation of Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. أستغفر العظيم من كل ذنب ومعصية ومن كل ما يخالف دين الإسلام يا الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا وهاب يا وهاب يا وهاب يا مسبب الأسباب يا مفتاح الأبواب يا مقلب القلوب والأبصار يا رب دلائل المتخيرين يا غيث المستخيرين يا حي يا قيوم يا ذو الجلال والإكرام. فاتحة الشريف. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي عنك وزرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق ومن شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس مالك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. Know that there is no God except the God. La ilaha illallah, 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 la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, 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 Muhammadur Rasulullah, alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد النبي الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد النبي الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد النبي الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد النبي الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد الحبيب الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد الحبيب الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد الحبيب الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد الحبيب الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد الشافي الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد الشافي الله عليه صلاة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد الشافي الله عليه الصلاة لا إله إلا الله 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 محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم صلوات الشريفة بسم الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم 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 Allahu Allahu Allah Hak Allahu 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 Allah Hak Allahu 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 Allah Hak صل يا ربي وسلم على جميع أنبياء والمرسلين وعلى كل أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين على أشرف الأمين السيدين محمدين صلوات على أفضل الأمين السيدين محمدين صلوات على أكمال الأمين السيدين محمدين صلوات صلوات الله وملائكته وأنبيائه ورسوله وجميع كوكه على محمد وعلى آل محمد عليه وعليهم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته ودي الله تبارك وتعالى عن سيدنا شعب رسول الله أجمعين وأن يتبين بهم بإحسان وأن مجتدين آمدين وأن علماء متقين وأن أولياء الصالحين أما الشيخين في طريقة نقشبندية آلية وقد صلوات الله وهم الزاكية ونوت الأجرات مباركة ودلوت الذين مباركاتهم وفيداتهم دائما والحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين إلى خضرات النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وآله وصحبه الكرام وإلى أنبياء وإلى أولياء قصتان روحي إمام طارق وقوتي كليك شعب الدين نقشبند ومثل الويس البكاري وإلى الشيخ عبد القادر الجيلاني وإلى الشيخ شريف هداية الله وإلى سنن أمبول وإلى سنن جيري ونور والي سونغو وإلى الشيخ يوسف مكاسري وإلى الشيخ عبد الله فايز الدغستاني وإلى زين دبير وإلى صوفي عبد الله وإلى مولانا الشيخ نازي مدين لقاني وإلى الشيخ داود الرصاوين وإلى قسطور وإلى الشيخ دانج بدر الدين وإلى مولانا الشيخ هشام كباني وإلى الشيخ دكتور طارق القدري وإلى الشيخ بادشاه وإلى الشيخ محمد الديل وإلى الدكتور نور كباني وإلى كياي مصطفى عقيل وإلى كياي يحيى كلي مستقف واستدينا واستديكيون الفاتحة أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم استعين الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم Ya Allah, we pray for the soul of the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his noble ancestors and his noble descendants. And we pray for all the previous prophets and their noble ancestors and their noble descendants. We pray for the Ahlul Bayt, the Khilafah Rashideen, the Sahaba Ikram, the Ulama, the Awliya, and especially my Sheikh, Sufi Abdullah, Mulana Sheikh Nazim, Sheikh Dawood Rosa Owen, and my dear father, Richard Kevin Armstrong. Ya Allah, bless their souls and raise their stations in your divine presence. We pray for all of our mothers and our fathers, our grandparents, our ancestors. Ya Allah, if there's anything which we have done or will do which is pleasing to you, we pray that you grant the blessing of this upon our ancestors and upon our prophets and upon the awliya Allah. Ya Allah, we pray that you bless our aunties and our uncles, our brothers and our sisters, our nieces and nephews, and if we are married, our wife or our husband. Children, if we have children, and if not, our future wife or future husband or future children, Ya Allah. We pray that you grant our families to be under your divine protection and blessing, and always connected to the Prophet Muhammad through the awliya Allah, and through the Prophet Muhammad to your divine presence. And we pray that this may be a channel where light and blessings may flow to us and through our families. And we pray that we may have light to the right of us and light to the left of us, light behind us, light in front of us, light above us and light below us, and to be filled with light. We pray to be filled with light. We pray to be filled with light, i.e., enlightenment and understanding, as well as spiritual blessings and nourishment for our souls. Ya Allah, we pray to not be left alone, even for a moment, with our own nafs, and to be connected to the pious and to the pious ones, to the Prophet Muhammad and the awliya Allah and the prophets. Ya Allah, we pray that you grant us openings to understanding. We pray that you help us to discern the truth from the false, as indeed you promised in the Holy Quran that truth stands clear from error. And we pray that you not let us be misguided after we've been guided. Misguided in any way or form, whether that be through misguided understanding of religion or misguided religion, whether that be misguided conspiracy theories or misguided false fake science. Ya Allah, we pray for understanding, we pray for wisdom, and we pray that you open for us the ability to learn, Grant us the patience and steadfastness to learn and to study. And also that you grant us understanding spiritually within our hearts, that we may remain steadfast on what is true, upon knowledge, upon wisdom, and be enlightened ones, and not those who fall into the darkness of ignorance and jahiliyah. Ya Allah, forgive us, forgive us, forgive us. Bless us and our families and our communities and our whole human family. Ya Allah, forgive us all and bless us all. For the sake of your beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sayyid Rabbi wa sallim ala jami anbiyahi wa mursaleen, wa linkunin ajma'in, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Thank you for joining us for this week's Sohbet and Sufi meditation. I look forward to seeing you on Friday, my Friday reflections, which will be done online. And I'll be back again next week, inshallah, for this Sohbet and Sufi meditation. Hi, Mum. So, wish you all a very good evening if you're in the UK, and wherever you are in the world. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all.